It's hard to argue that most people are drawn to beautiful characters, despite them being unrealistic, not making sense, and plain out of place. Like, how many popular games do you even know where girls' makeups isn't put onto them like superglue, where extended fighting, going through mud and jumping into water cannot wash it off? Apparently in video game worlds, waterproof mascara is stronger than adamantium. Nowadays, we have a lot of fighting about how characters in video games look, especially women. Some argue that too many female characters are made overly attractive, or even sexualized, and wonder whether that's okay, especially in games that aren't explicitly labeled as sexual content. Others religiously buy any game that has pretty characters. And I mean, it's clear that conversation is usually quite one-sided, because nobody is really troubled by overly muscular and good-looking guys. Despite that, honestly, most of this comes down to personal taste and preference. And thankfully, most people just plain don't care about it. At least it seems that way. Yet, it seems to me that there is a bigger discussion to be had on this topic. Since most of what is being talked online is being quite reductive. Most of the time it boils down to whether people just want to prove a certain political point. But today, I want to dive deeper into the question, do we actually need pretty characters in games? And if we do, then why? Politics aside, sexualization has always been a spicy topic, not just in games, but in all kinds of media. Back in the day, the complaints usually came from puritanical voices, mostly religious groups, warning that too much cleavage on the screen would lead to the moral downfall of society, or whatever. Fast forward to a couple decades, and while the faces have changed, the song kinda stayed the same. Now it's framed around politics, identity, empowerment. Words like problematic, objectification, and male gaze get thrown around like dodgeballs. But underneath it all, the core argument hasn't really changed. So the question is, why do we even have sexy characters in media at all? Like, what's the point of giving a character gravity-defying proportions or skin-tight outfit? Is it necessary? Does it add anything? Or is it just lazy design to grab some cheap attention? Like half of YouTube thumbnails do, and mine probably included. Because if you clicked on this video because I put Eva from Stellar Blade, well, yeah, that's kind of the point. But I think the question goes a lot deeper than just boobs in thumbnail. Because when people argue about sexualization, what they're really getting at is this. What is media even for? Is it supposed to be a mirror of real life? A lesson in morality? A political statement? Or is it just supposed to be fun? Because depending on which answer you pick, the whole sexy character thing looks completely different. And this debate didn't just appear out of nowhere. You can trace it back to a few big flashpoints, like remember early Tomb Raider, polygonal chest and all. She was iconic, sure, but also sparked some of the first real media noise about women being too sexualized in games, even though those were just couple polygons. It was all over gaming magazine that days. People either loved it or accused her of corrupting the youth. And more recently, it's been games like Bayonetta or Stellar Blade that reignite the conversation every time they pop up. Stellar Blade especially blew up online, not because of gameplay, but because the internet couldn't decide if protagonist's outfit was empowering, embarrassing, or just for the horny dudes. And then you've got stuff like Resident Evil Village, where Lady Dimitrescu became a meme not just because of her height, but because everyone online was collectively down bad for Vampire Mummy. And nobody complained about her being too sexy, quite the opposite. Mostly people loved it. Well, almost everyone. But really, it's not like anyone truly dislikes a character being good looking, they just argue about their place in media. And every time it starts the same way. A trailer drops, some of the streamers make a hot take, and suddenly there is a mini culture war in the replies. People defending artistic freedom on one side, people demanding more responsible design on the other. It's exhausting and kinda funny, because the energy is never consistent. Like Street Fighter 6 has shirtless muscle gods oiled up and throwing fireballs and no one really blinks. But show some jiggle physics and it's suddenly the end of the world. The thing is, I think both sides have some points, it's just we refuse to listen to each other. Because on one side you've got people who feel like over-sexualized character design is outdated. They're tired of characters who are written like set dressing, existing only to look hot in cutscenes. They argue that this kind of design reinforces shallow gender norms, makes gaming look juvenile and pushes away people who just want good characters, regardless of how much skin they show. For them, it's not about censoring beauty, it's about moving past tired tropes. And then you've got the other side, which sees this as another wave of unnecessary moral policing. They don't want every game to become some bland, sanitized experience where no one's allowed to be hot or edgy. They argue that games are fantasy, not sermons, and that not every game needs to say something. And sometimes people just want cool, sexy, badass characters doing cool stuff like swinging swords or slapping demons. They see beauty, and yes, even sex appeal, as a valid part of expression, not a flaw to fix. Clearly, we all care about this topic. But the real question is, why do we care so much? Why does the idea of attractive or not attractive fictional character make people argue more than loot boxes or broken launches? To get there, we need to start looking at what we actually want games to be. So, let's talk about that. You see, I think part of the problem is that due to players being wildly different, developers are expected to make a game about everything at once. Like, it needs to be fun, it needs to be beautiful, it needs probably to be politically correct, morally uplifting, perhaps diverse, perhaps empowering. It needs to have the broadest appeal imaginable. Because if you don't, you're not gonna really sell the game to many people at once. And I think one of the problems is that with games becoming increasingly political, it's very hard to please both camps. And if you don't please both of them, realistically, you're basically losing half of the market right there and then. And nobody can really allow themselves to do that, right? So that's why developers are trying to appeal to everyone at once and make those sanitized experiences. And sure, if there was much less fake virtue signaling, some of the things I mentioned become less important. Despite that, I think the culture has shifted too much for us to see a full return to the games in the 90s. But now that I discussed both sides of the argument, here's what I think. Games are escapism. While any art is bound to be dissected on undertones and its cultural messaging, people fail to understand, despite that, the primary focus is to allow the player to live in another world and, well, have fun at it. That's what most people want, and that's actually the only reason why you would buy the game. Something cool to look at, fun to play, and maybe something that sticks in your head afterwards. That's it. You're not gonna play Devil May Cry or Guilty Gear to learn about modern day politics. You're playing because the characters look awesome, the combat slaps, and the whole thing feels like a caffeine overdose and an anime intro had a baby. The main purpose of the game is for player to have fun, and so many developers nowadays forget about it. Yes, game can have author's message and artistic purpose built into it. It should even. Yes, it can have irony on political regimes and different agendas, but despite all that, it's not the main point. If you're not having fun while playing the game, it doesn't matter what message the game has, since to be fair, if no one is going to play it, nobody's gonna see it. And when it comes to fun, beauty plays a part. Yeah, that's it. A character being hot or good looking or cool or stylish, that adds to the experience. It's part of the appeal. You want to play as someone who looks badass or sexy or mysterious or powerful, it doesn't matter if you're a guy or a girl or whatever else. People love to look at something good, and that's just how it is. It's like watching a movie with stylish cinematics or listening to a song with a killer beat. You just feel better. Same things with characters. When you boot up a game and your main character steps into the scene looking like a mix between a fashion model and a death goddess, that creates a vibe. And if that vibe matches the game's tone, even better. After all, it's clear that 99% of people would enjoy spending their next 100 hours around someone they like looking at. Right, Stellar Blade? And here's where debate always goes sideways. People start acting like beauty automatically equals objectification. Like the moment a female character shows thigh, it's exploitation and the dev should be dragged into 3-hour panel about ethics in character design. And I'm just sitting there thinking, have you even played the game? Do you even understand the tone, the world, the context? Because context matters. A sexy character in Bayonetta makes sense. That whole game is a stylish power trip wrapped into over-the-top action. She's literally summoning hell beasts with her hair. That's not meant to be subtle, despite some people pretending her biggest sin is visible waistline. But if you put the same design in, I don't know, a grounded war drama about grief and loss, and yeah, that's gonna be weird. But that's not what's happening in most cases. Most of the time the outrage is manufactured. It's just people reacting to a screenshot, ready to fight over it online for likes and dopamine. Despite all of that, there are of course clear examples where eye candy characters are added out of context and out of place, just for the sheer reason as to capitalize on gooners. Which is, well, I don't even think there is much political to say about this. Most of the time it's just bad and misleading business practice. And again, it's not even offensive, it's just bad design. It's the kind of things that make players roll their eyes, not bright think pieces. Because you can tell when a dev is actually trying to build a vibe and when they're just aiming for money with minimal effort. And let's be honest with ourselves here. Despite all the Eva's look in Stellar Blade, it wouldn't have sold so well or got such good reviews if gameplay was absolute garbage. Because no amount of forums is going to save a bad game. Quite honestly, this whole discourse is quite reductive. Both sides to it have some valid points while making it look like they don't hear the other. I myself am the guy and I like to see a pretty girl as any other guy, but I do feel turned off if I feel like this eye candy serves no purpose whatsoever, other than just to get into my pocket. So, to answer the question, do we need pretty characters? The honest answer is no, we don't need them. Just like we don't need stories, or orchestral soundtracks, or ray tracing, or dynamic weather systems. None of those things are strictly necessary for a game to function. But that's never been a point. Games aren't built on necessity, they're built on desire. They're driven by what we want to feel when we pick up the controller. And the truth is, beauty is part of that. Not because players are shallow, but because beauty, however you define it, is just a part of how humans process art. We're wired to be drawn to aesthetics, to symmetry, to style. That doesn't mean every character needs to look like supermodel, but it does mean there's a reason people remember iconic designs. There's a reason some characters become posters, cosplay, avatars, and obsession. They spark something visual, something emotional, and perhaps even something aspirational. That's not a design flaw, that's just good art direction. The problem isn't beauty, it's when beauty is the only thing character has. When their writing, personality, and purpose are paper thin, and everything about them feels hollow, without the visual appeal. But again, that's not an issue with them being pretty, that's just lazy writing. You could do the same thing with ugly character and it would still suck. So no, we don't need pretty characters, but we also don't need to justify them. They've always been part of the medium, and as long as the industry keeps growing, they'll keep evolving too, because what we find beautiful also changes, and that's a good thing, I guess. There's a room for all of it, and pretty characters aren't the problem, empty ones are.